And we can go ahead and disable the waiting room, make it a little easier on you. Welcome, welcome, colleagues who have tuned in. So nice to have you here. We'll give it just another minute before we start, but if you want to start popping in the chat who you are, what organization you're with, and where you're joining us from, we always appreciate that information, but we are so thrilled to have you on today's webinar with our colleagues, our labor market information experts. So thanks for making the time to be with us. Should be a jam-packed but exciting and fruitful conversation. So just your name, your organization, and where you're joining us from. Wonderful. Good to see you, Joe. Hi, Jennifer. Hey, Vincent. Glad to have you on. I was so excited to see the news about Andy McCracken. He's a good one.
Angie and I've worked together for a long time, actually. I was about to message Vincent in the chat about that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, man, what a small world.
Yeah,
I used to speak for him once a year.
Yeah, we used to work together when he oversaw the student body president organization that would work with the White House. I was one of the student body presidents that would work on those initiatives with the White House and him.
Very cool. No surprise there. Awesome. So nice to have all of you. I'm loving seeing everybody who's popping up in the chat. So thank you so much for being here. And Jill and Melissa, so nice to have you all. I got to talk to Jennifer and earlier, so very happy that, and Jill, to get to see you guys next week. So this will be fun. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll switch to the next slide. Just as always, a couple of housekeeping notes. We'll make sure that this recording is available to folks. No matter which breakout session, we will have breakout sessions, but both of them will be recorded. So if you're having a really difficult time deciding which one to go into when we make that option available to you, no worries, you will have access to both. But by all means, please feel free to keep the conversation going in the chat as we're talking. Our team members will be happy to answer any questions that you have, either as part of this conversation or in follow-up, but let's have a really engaging discussion today. On the next slide, we'll just go a little bit over what we are planning to cover today. So we've got a couple of updates on the Chamber Foundation's end. We'll then go into 2 breakout rooms for labor market information with our fantastic subject matter experts. We will have Q&A in those breakout sessions, so something to clarify. And then we'll all come back to the large room. If anybody does have any announcements that they would like to share with the group, any major milestones achieved in your TPM work, any baby milestones achieved in your TPM work or your personal life, if you want to interpret it in that way, then we welcome any and all announcements that you all are celebrating. And then we'll just see if there are any final questions before we close out. So with that, we can go to the next slide and we'll start with some of the opportunities that we have available to you all as TPM National Learning Network members. As always, we have open enrollment for the TPM Academy at any time in the case that you all are trying to get some of your colleagues to participate in a TPM Academy experience. We have had a lot of success with our blended learning delivery of the TPM Academy. So we're currently doing one right now with our fantastic colleagues, Deb Broberg and Taylor Dunn from the San Diego Economic Development Corporation as our lead faculty. And I know that folks have had a very positive experience with them. So huge kudos to our TPM Academy faculty. And we'll have a new blended learning opportunity that will kick off in May. So that top link will bring you to the enrollment in the case that you, if you yourself by chance have not gone through the TPM Academy yet, or if you would be willing to share that with your colleagues, we would love to have them participate. So that's what that top QR code is for. We will be releasing this week, and we can include this in the follow-up materials, a request for proposals to co-host a TPM Career Readiness Academy with our team. So what does the career readiness angle mean? Essentially, you're learning the core curriculum of the TPM framework, but you're also doing a deep dive into how the framework can be applied to opportunity populations. And so we think about that meeting diversification goals extra in a career readiness learning experience. And so we had great success doing 2 versions of the Career Readiness Academy in 2022 and 2023 with Michigan, Florida, Arkansas, and Illinois. And we're looking for the next state, or it could be a collection of organizations within a state that wants to host that next academy. The really critical for this particular academy is community colleges must be at the table. We think it very helpful to have community-based organizations at the table, and there has to be a commitment amongst all partners that are participating in the academy that it is absolutely essential for us to have employer-aligned career pathways for adult students of color. So that's really an important focus area that we'll be seeking based on the questions that we're asking in the request for proposal, but happy to share more on that and have any conversations if that piques your interest. But I know we do have a couple of colleagues who participated in career readiness academies on the call, at least 1 or 2, as far as I can tell, people who co-hosted those career readiness academies. So please feel free to provide your testimonials in the chat should you wish, but would love to hear from folks that are interested in seeing that request for proposal. And as I said, we'll share that with the broader network this week. On May 23rd, we will host our next implementation workshop. This will be held in Washington, D.C. It's a 1-day, all-day. Let's really dive into some specific topics now that you've learned the TPM theory, the framework, and the theory behind the framework. How do you then apply that in real life? 2 particular focus areas for this implementation workshop will be around measurement and evaluation and diversification of the workforce. And so we'll be bringing in subject matter experts, and it's a lot of hands-on learning, a lot of small group discussion. You receive one-on-one consultations with TPM Academy faculty members and subject matter experts on topics that are of most interest to you, related, to those areas that we're really diving into. So we'll be hopeful to see some of you on May 23rd in Washington, D.C. If you would like to go ahead and register, there's no cost to attend. If you'd like to register, that bottom QR code should bring you to the registration link. Just a reminder, should be pretty quick and easy announcements. We will relaunch our job quality specialty course later on this summer. We had a fantastic in-person implementation workshop with about 20 partners. So major gratitude to those of you who either participated in the pilot of that learning content and or participated in the in-person workshop that we held earlier this month. It was great to see you all and hope that you got some value from that experience. We're now going to integrate the feedback that we've gotten from both the pilot and the implementation workshop, make those edits to the learning content, and then relaunch that information to the broader network. We want to make sure that September 24th and 25th are on all of your calendars for the in-person TPM National Learning Network Summit. And then finally, if you have not yet earned your TPM Talent Supply Chain Manager badge, would highly encourage you to take advantage of that enrollment in the summative assessment and go ahead and earn that badge. On the next slide, again, we'll kind of get through the remainder of the announcements quickly, but we've got our next web tool workshop series that will kick off on March 21st. So just a couple of weeks from now, you can enroll in that course by using the QR code on the screen. So if you're trying to better understand how these tools can be used to implement TPM and enhance your data collection efforts, your visualization efforts, this is the hands-on training that we can do with our partners at SAU and dedicate real time to learning those web tools and learning how to use them effectively. So that's a 4-part series. They're typically about an hour and a half for each session, if that's helpful. And then on the next slide, I'm going to hand it over to our colleague, Mike Lewis. So with that, Mike, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's Wednesday is going well. I wanted to take some time today to give you some quick information on what TPM leadership is and how you can get involved if you're interested. So to begin with, the term TPM leadership refers to our faculty, fellows, and mentors who function as, you could say, like an instructional advising extension of the Chamber Foundation staff. There's actually some of our leadership on the call right now today, so appreciate y'all joining us. So actually, shout out to Deb, who's actually presenting today, who's actually one of the faculty members who's leading a blended learning cohort right now. These individuals, they've demonstrated success with implementing TPM in their respective communities, and now that they've done that, they're committed to sharing their knowledge with their peers in the network. So let's go through these 3 positions a little bit more in depth. So as far as faculty, you could see them similar to the educators you may have had in school. Excuse me. TPM faculty have an extensive knowledge and experience in building collaboratives and talent pipelines, which they impart on TPM Academy learners as they learn the TPM framework. You might see TPM faculty facilitating academy sessions, like I just said with Deb's case, or in providing implementation advice at workshops, sort of like how Jamie just mentioned. We have the implementation workshop coming up later on this year, or the job quality workshop that we just had earlier in the month. TPM fellows, now they lead the effort to maintain and expand the TPM initiative. So when a member of the NLN, or maybe somebody who's interested in joining the TPM movement, requests information about how to solve maybe a niche issue in their community, or they just want to know more about TPM activity in their area, TPM fellows are there to address that, right? As we all know, continuous improvement is a major part of the TPM framework. Fellows apply that same approach to the TPM initiative by suggesting new activities, or maybe providing new resources that they may be using, or they may have found, and share that with the network. Jamie had referenced the in-person fall summit. If you were there with us last year, you saw that we introduced 13 new TPM fellows. I'm not sure if anybody's on the call today that was with the new group of fellows, but if you are, congratulations again to you. That was the culmination of an application process that started in May and ended in September. This year, starting again in May, we will be accepting nominations for the TPM fellows. More information for that will come later on. Last but not least, we have our TPM mentors. The mentors provide support and critical guidance to our new learners in a small group setting that are currently going through a TPM Academy and developing their employer collaborative projects. If you're not familiar with what the employer collaborative project is, you could kind of say like their capstone as they go through the TPM Academy. Mentors provide guidance, not necessarily do the project for them, but kind of steer them in the right direction and make sense of a very confusing thing. The TPM can be a lot when you're going through the academy, but mentors help by simplifying it and making it, like I said, making it more sense, making more sense of it. The TPM Peer Mentor Program is a new opportunity that we are developing that would be a one-to-one peer partnership for anyone within the TPM network that wants to develop deeper relationships within the network. I'm actually going to put a poll after I finish speaking. It's going to be a quick poll, just asking you a couple questions about what a peer mentor it could be and how it could potentially help out. So I'll put those questions in a poll in a second. But I do want to point out that in the right side of the screen, you'll see a QR code. This is a link to join us on March 28th for our leadership webinar. And this is where we will go into further detail on how to become a TPM faculty, fellow, or mentor. Lexi, thank you for putting that link in the chat. So if you're like me and struggle with using QR codes, you can use that link right there. So again, thank you for your time. And I'm going to create a poll right now. And please share your answers there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Are folks seeing the poll?
Actually, Lexi, you might actually have to do it because
Not yet.
me that I can't.
There we go. Looks like
There
it
it
is. Thank you. So just take a second to fill out that poll, and then we'll start to transition to the next part of our program. One of the things that we're constantly seeking, as you all know, is continuous improvement. And I think one area in which we want to improve is just how we make sure that we're making really good use of y'all's time. When you're willing to commit the hour to participate in these webinars, these quarterly webinars, how can we make it an engaging experience? And of course, it's important for us to have an opportunity to bring you all as the voices and the doers, the boots on the ground of TPM, make sure that we're kind of ushering that high touch, great engagement as part of this learning experience. If you want to go to the next poll. Yeah, you know what? I think that it looks like Are folks able to fill out the poll?
Nope, it's okay.
Okay.
In the chat, we will send out one separately.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Nikki. So just in terms of by way of transition, in the case that folks have not had yet a chance to register for the other webinar dates, there are the QR codes, but again, we'll include those both in the chat as well as have a chance to offer them in the follow-up. So we hope that you'll join us for these remaining dates. But all that to say is that we very much are hoping to make these engaging experiences for you all, that you all feel like you have a chance to contribute to the conversation and really participate effectively and get value out of these quarterly webinars. So if you haven't had a chance to topics to be decided, but again, this is the type of thing that we're hoping to get feedback on. So on the next slide, just want to provide a little bit of context of why we thought the labor market information would be a helpful deep dive for this particular quarterly engagement. Yes, it is on the front end of the TPM framework, but that wasn't necessarily what decided things for us. It was that, as we facilitate the TPM Academy, what we find is that there typically are two groups of folks. There's the people that really have not had exposure to labor market information in the past. It's just not a part of their day-to-day. There are those that have a lot of experience with labor market information. They use it in a variety of different ways. Maybe they're aware of it, they know how to digest it, and that's pretty much leave it there. But then there are other folks who do it very consistently on a daily basis. That informs their thinking and informs their strategy. And so we wanted to provide some learning options for kind of both of those audiences because we spend only a little bit of time really in terms of the TPM Academy facilitation of familiarizing people with labor market information. On the next slide, just to kind of connect how this relates, to the TPM framework, is we think about this from the context of, well, how can this inform the demand planning process, right? How can we use what information is available to us as a starting place that we can build upon with that more granular primary labor market information coming directly from employers? But we do find that it can be very, very helpful to have that starting point. And so how can we equip you all with the tools, whether you're coming at this from the perspective of, I'm not at all familiar, or I'm somewhat familiar, or I do use this information, but how can we connect that to both the collection and the use of TPM demand planning data? So we're really excited that our colleagues, John Gonzalez from the Tulare Workforce Investment Board and Deb Broberg from Real Time Talent, we're willing to offer these sessions. We're going to go into breakouts, and you'll have an opportunity to choose which breakout session you want to go into. So if you want kind of the 101 version, this is still relatively new to me. I haven't spent a lot of time with labor market information. Then doing the 101 version with John will be a good fit. If you are somewhat familiar with labor market information, state occupational projections, even real-time labor market information vendors, then going with Deb is probably a good choice. But just a reminder for all that no matter which session you go into, both of them will be recorded and available to you once we conclude today's webinar. So in the spirit of polls, we'll hope that this one works well for you guys. We just wanted to get kind of a pulse check of where people are with their understanding of labor market information. So if we could launch our next poll, and let's see if can I get a thumbs up that people are seeing questions and responses and are able to submit. Awesome. Thanks, Vincent. You're the only one that I see right now, Vincent. So you're my.
It's working.
Great. Thank you, guys. So we'll give you just a minute. We'll see what the responses are before we pop up the breakout room options. And yes, it should be, most of the questions are single choice, I think, with the exception of one. And I guess for that first question, I should have said primarily. Got some responses coming in. We've got about a third of responses in, so take one more minute. Some interesting data coming back through. All right, we're about 2/3 of the way there. So I'm gonna go ahead and close out the poll in 10 more seconds. Couple stragglers coming through. All right, we are going to go ahead and end the poll and let's talk through some of the results. We can share those out. Can everybody see the results? Are they popping up? Awesome, thanks, Vincent. So in terms of that first question, which of the following LMI, if any, do you currently leverage for your, we're seeing most folks said the state labor market data. A couple folks said both national labor market data as well as local survey data coming through either chambers of commerce, maybe trade associations. About 14% said Lightcast. We've got a couple of others who said Chimera Jobs EQ. And then one who said, I don't know, which is always fine. What are your most useful workforce program data sources? We've got, let's see, quite a few people specified some state-based agencies. We've got some folks that say MZ data, a couple folks that said unsure, which is always a totally fine answer. Some that come from state workforce agencies, more folks saying that, employer demographics. Then on the third question, what are your most useful education sources? It looks like the Kentucky team has a CTE employer connector tool, which sounds really cool, coming straight from the community colleges or state universities, intermediate school districts. Again, a couple folks saying unsure. Again, totally fine. IPEDS data coming through, again, some state-based higher education agencies, community college-based agencies. And then finally, which partners currently provide you with labor market information data? It looks like the majority of folks said government agencies, other folks have access within their organization, other folks said education sources, and then another colleague said unsure, which again, that's part of the reason that we're here, and hope to equip you all with some tools to use at your disposal to enhance those TPM efforts. So what we're going to do now is we will open up the breakout rooms. If you want to attend the 101 session, Lexi, you can go ahead and open up the breakout room so that folks can start to elect in. You can go into the 101 version with John Gonzalez. If you would like to go to the 201 version, then you're going to go to the second room with Deb Broberg. All right. Does anybody have any questions before we break out? You should be able to see the option to join the room, but please let us know if you cannot see that option.
Have together. There's our recording. It's just started, and we're going to begin our polar plunge to really dive into the cold waters around how to use LMI and TPM data as you're supporting your TPM initiatives. So let's jump in. If I could have the slides shared, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much, team. We'll flip ahead to a couple of slides because the agenda really is that we're going to look at what we know today and how you understand that, reaching agreement with your employers, specific employer demand, and then the closure is what else do you know? As Jamie mentioned a moment ago, demand planning is one of the places where we know data becomes critically important, but I'm going to spend the bulk of our time in this breakout today talking about some of those front end pieces about what do we know today and how do we get to agreement. So on the next slide, where does data inform decisions when we're working through TPM? And we've got a small enough team here, gang. Just shout out, like, which of the strategies leverage data?
2, 3, 4.
Yes.
All of them.
Very good, Vincent. Star for the day. So just to state the obvious, right? I mean, overall, we all know TPM, as Jamie mentioned a moment ago with some of the workshops coming up, this is about opening the talent pool to remove barriers, address job quality where employers possibly can, and improve the workplace experience for everyone in your communities. So on the next slide, just a prompting question again, what data is most useful? So we polled on a couple of these points, but Bureau of Labor Statistics, real-time data. We know, right, team, that data is both quantitative and qualitative. So you've got both sides of those opportunities to really dive deeper and understand what's going on in your local communities, maybe relative to statewide data or relative to nationwide data. But it's so important. We're not going to get into talking about the nuts and bolts of SOC codes and SIP-SOP crosswalks and all those things that I bet some of you in this virtual room could teach courses on. But what we're going to talk about today is how do we really focus in on the data sources and the types of data that really get you to outcomes that the employers cannot achieve on their own. So with that, I wanted to just ask in a chat sort of way, use your chat again, team. Share one of the most impactful data sources in your work, in your respective geographies. Just pop some of that in the chat. That's our attempt at being interactive in our Polar Plunge breakout session today. Okay, y'all? So please do pop some answers in there. Yes, 0, Lightcast. So Lightcast was a theme I saw. I didn't see anybody checking off Talent Neuron, actually. And those are just platforms, right, with differing ways that they represent some of the real-time data. But that's helpful. Keep your comments coming so others can kind of see where we have some themes. We've got some local agency partners, community partners, healthcare. It depends on your industry, right, Vincent, to your comment. Which industry you're working on will drive what data is likely most useful. So with that, we're going to take a look on the next slide at a couple of things that we knew in Minnesota. So this is all about getting your hands around what do you know today. So I'm not going to go through any sort of real in-depth review because you all will have these slides. Our chamber partners in the foundation will share a PDF of all these slides. So you will have this to reference later on. But, you know, this gives you the framework, right, for what's going on in your state. And in Minnesota, you know, most recently, we were looking at about a 2.6% unemployment rate, which had, you know, been our September year ago data, or sorry, 2.2% prior year. So let me just tell y'all, unemployment is really, really low in Minnesota, which, as we all know, creates a whole nother set of challenges and opportunities versus our 3% unemployment rate nationally. So again, this gives you a way to kind of frame up what you're facing in your own state or your own geography. On the next slide, and that came from BLS, right? Same for Vermont, right, Marianne? Thank you. So this next slide is lifting up some demographics, some other things we knew in Minnesota. And so you can see that at the Minnesota level, for all of us, I bet, demographics matter in our state. I'll just own that, right? Not everyone in our state is having the same experience with our really, really low unemployment rate. And regional composition is very different when you look at the population demographics that are shown on this slide. So again, American Community Survey as a data source here, and really demonstrating that our Black, Indigenous, and people of color have increased significantly. I just note it's almost a full percentage, 0.9% over the prior year, and that is slated to continue accelerating in growth. So you really want to dive deeply and take a look at what's going on in the communities of focus for your employer's work. On the next slide, another thing we know, and you all know too, is what's going on with educational attainment in your state or your local communities. So for the population ages 25 to 64, serious variations on the theme, right? As we start teasing Minnesota apart into our respective regional economies. Statewide, those with no high school diploma has dropped to 6%, although some neighborhoods it's running as high as 20%. So again, really important to start teasing the data sets further apart. Those with high school as their highest academic attainment from 21.4 down to 21.2 year over year. So it's starting to trend in the right direction statewide, but again, nuances matter and are really important. So with that, as you talk to your TPM collaboratives, you want to get very crisp on what this looks like, especially as you move towards that strategy 5 part of the framework and thinking about who to partner with and what the appropriate co-design solutions are going to be. So on this next slide, I'm going to just pause here. Let's see. So as we ask this question, you've done your research, you've done your high-level analysis, you've probably got some pretty big numbers that are very compelling, especially if you're looking at industries and starting to dive into occupation codes. So how do you determine where to start? So you've looked in your own backyard. You know what your GDP contributors are by industry, probably. You've looked at who's employing the most people, most likely. You're really starting to know where you see the biggest talent gaps in terms of the data that you can get your arms around. But really, the question here for us to share with one another, who are your employer champions? Like, who is honestly active and visible in your ecosystem around wanting to tackle a more strategic way of solving this? So again, we'll just use the chat for a little bit of interaction and help each other understand. Here's the question. What's been your most important source of information or relationships in reaching agreement on where to start the TPM Collaborative's work? So I'll just pause, give you a little moment to answer. What's been your most important source of information or relationships in reaching agreement on where to start? I'm curious to see your answers, team, because this is a question we wrestle with a lot in Minnesota. So feel free to use the chat. I'm not going to pause and read through it. You all can read the chat as I'm talking us through the content here today, but please do pause and answer. What's been your most important source of information or relationships in reaching agreement on where to start? Because for me, that's a critical place where the power of this collective process starts to resonate with some employers or business associations more than others. So then let's go to the next slide and take a little bit more of a look on what we knew about in Minnesota and how we were able to start thinking about reaching agreement, right? So this is a data set. I bet many of you have seen it because I don't know, Jobs EQ, I saw a couple of you, I think, answered that you use this as a data source. So you're very familiar with location quotients if you've used this data set. And you can see this is our state level look at Minnesota. And when you look about wage opportunity on the y-axis and the forecasted growth on the x, you can see front and center financial services, electronics, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, that upper right-hand quadrant, very likely places you might find some energy to do this work. It's important to look at the strategies that are gonna, and the opportunities that are gonna give you new access points for underserved, underrepresented community members, right? Like, where do you have some traction with jobs that could likely be an entry point or an origin job, if you will, as we talk about it at Real Time Talent? That's another Rework America Alliance model that we use to rethink what are those origin jobs and the gateway jobs and the target jobs of highest wage and career potential growth. But this is another source of information that we use quite a bit here in Minnesota to get a sense of what we knew today. On the next slide, I'm going to pivot into career and tech ed, because that's another, as Jamie mentioned in her opening remarks, critically important. Our community colleges have an absolutely essential role to play in helping us narrow the talent shortages that we're all facing in all our communities. So this is a snapshot of what we often use as we're doing our work with career and tech education consortia leadership and membership, to take a look at the career fields as they're defined in the 6 groupings. So how many of you all are familiar with the CTE, career fields, career clusters, that sort of language, right? I see the heads nodding. So this is not unfamiliar to you all, but it's really helpful as you're thinking forward about where you might need to be looking at the biggest award gaps that exist in your local geography. So on this slide, just briefly, there's a whole lot to unpack here. I haven't gone into any level of detail other than to just put this teaser out here. But as all the data sets will often require, you need to dig a little deeper. Don't take any data point at face value and then want to run with it, right? Because you can see, for example, that business management and admin, that one yellow line going across the middle of the slide, it's forecasted to have an annual decline in actual need, if you will. But you're seeing that the total demand, when you look at excerpts and transfers, that is also the career field that's going to need the highest number of people. So again, we know talent pipeline doesn't need to start with the jobs that have the biggest numbers of need, but often that's a good indicator. So again, lots to unpack here. I'm not going to be going through it, but I'm just giving you that teaser. On the next slide, Another thing we knew about in Minnesota is what you all know about and have access to, and this is job posting data. So on this slide, we're using Gartner's Talent Neuron Plan as a framework, a platform to get at some of this data. And we in our state anyway, face often a lot of conversation about, yeah, but this isn't the real number. Like this isn't totally it. And it's true. Job posting data is not factual data, but it has proven to be yet again in our pandemic era experience more than ever. Some of our economic modeling, national leading organizations did some work again to telling us much of anything. And guess what? It is. This is the single best correlated source of information to predict what employers are really looking for the most in the marketplace. Employers are not going to spend the money, the time, the resource to post jobs unless they really need people. Now, we also know there's noise in this data around things like evergreen recs and so forth, but when you get familiar with these data tools, you begin to understand how to tease some of that apart. So in this example, we were trying to address this perception that so many jobs are going hybrid in terms of their job postings and advertisings. And so there's a lot behind all of this, but I, again, wanted to lift it up as really a critical source of real-time data that you can get to have very strong indicators on what the industry employer demand is looking like. So on our next slide, I'm going to pause again and just, bring us into how we use data to reach agreement. And so at this point in our conversation, which I know is feeling very one-sided to me, so I apologize, but as you've done your work, what do employers agree is accurate within the data? I hope is a conversation you've had and seen a lot of energy around. The other thing is, what else do employers know? This is where you start getting that employer conversation going where they can challenge each other and maybe offer some intelligence, some insights that would never show up in the data that you're able to get your arms around at a more macro level. And you start the conversation, right, about what is their biggest pain point. Maybe not the job that requires the most hiring activity in the next foreseeable future, but where do they see an opportunity to work together on the job or a shared occupation that truly could shut them down. So these are just some key considerations. There's many, many more, but this is to me what makes Talent Pipeline very distinct and powerful relative to other initiatives that I know we all have going on in our communities. Career pathway efforts have been very powerful. Sectoral partnerships are getting a lot of attention and attraction and visibility. And yet, the data components of Talent Pipeline and truly validating with actual employer information, so you can start thinking about designing solutions where you find the right level of supply to meet the actual employer demand, is to me what makes Talent Pipeline so powerful. So on the next slide, I'm just going to throw a little bit more out about what we knew in Minnesota, and this is going to bring us to a current Talent Pipeline collaborative we have in process right now. But we knew in Minnesota, as I think we all started to know painfully during the early years of the pandemic, that our mental health needs as a society were growing. And in Minnesota, we had a ton of advocacy and business association activity going on to try to size what we know about what's happening in our mental health care component of the healthcare sector. So again, this was a very big issue which got our attention, and we had employers and employer associations coming our way. So on the next slide, as we looked a little deeper about what we could find out in this space of the healthcare sector, we started to look at some of the forecasting that we were able to do using the tools we've been talking about. Here's some data points that hold true for the state of the state in Minnesota when we were looking at doing this work back in 22 is when we started to get some traction around this. And again, I'm not going to go through the data points because you can read them, but there's a whole lot of questions that surface, right? And it is just a snapshot of a lot of other data sources we were pulling on to try to understand whether or not there might be an appetite to do some Talent Pipeline collaborative work in our state. On the next slide, we had to ask the other obvious question. What's going on with demographics? You saw the statewide demographics I shared earlier. All people are not having the same experience in Minnesota with educational attainment and other things. So what was going on with the healthcare practitioner talent in our state? And this is actually tied to our current representation. So look at the race component, y'all. Almost 85% of most all of these mental health care professionals were white and probably still are white. And so our providers know painfully well that having ability to positively impact one's mental health and well-being often is driven by who's able to provide you support and treatment. And if people don't look like you and are not folks you can relate to, the likelihood of really good outcomes is somewhat reduced many times, not all the time. But this was, again, a piece of data that was very compelling. And then on the next slide, we looked at educational attainment, the awards, and what is going on in the talent supply that we're seeing coming out of the education side of the equation. And we actually had a bit of a mismatch in terms of over-credentialed people. And this was really important because, by the way, our mental health care space had done tons of advocacy work even before COVID-19 arrived. And they'd impacted one of the case manager roles that had historically always had a regulatory requirement for a 4-year degree. Now, when we started this work, had a 2-year degree requirement, but employers hadn't changed their behavior. So therein lies the other big important opportunity and ability to impact more of a systems level change when you're working with groups of employers. So I'm going to just turn us to the next slide quickly, if I could. Thank you. And here's just another representation of some data that we were able to bring to the table. This again comes out of Chmura's Jobs EQ and leverages the standard occupational classification that you see listed in the footnote here, but really helpful for the employers to start looking at what is a reasonable estimate of the annual shortages. And when you see almost 200 awards short for child, family, and school social workers, it was a big wow, because we all know what's happened with our education sector and our young people and the mental health needs that are just exploding in that demographic space. So I'm going to pause. And again, we have really reduced time relative to what we hoped in terms of when I prepped this deck, but I'm going to go to the next slide for just a moment because I wanted to pause and have some conversation again. If we could, just those of you who want to go off mute, we're going to take 2 minutes. And I'd love to hear you just shout out, like, what was an example of where data was really instrumental to inform the formation of a TPM collaborative you are working with?
Okay, I'll go.
Yay.
This is Jackie. And data was very instrumental in forming my first collaborative here, which is Maritime, because we're looking at a demand of at least 11,000 people within the next year or two within this industry, within the region. So just having those numbers was really motivating.
Yeah. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, since you all are not fighting over going next, I'm going to ask that we move to the next slide because that was a perfect segue. Thank you, Jackie. To make it real, like, what do we need to know more about? Having the employer projections, right, is critically important. And this is how you start bringing your actual TPM data into the work. Getting the employers to offer up, what do they track and pay attention to today? What business measures are most impactful for them in running their business today? So what can they help you understand about what's coming tomorrow? Do they even know whether they're going to have new or replacement? Are they going to grow? Some growth needs for added staff. What's their turnover? What are the exits being driven by? Do they know their retirements? All of these pieces, right, become really, really powerful to this work. And on the next slide, I'm just going to go back to the Minnesota experience for a moment, because to the point you made, Jackie, here's what we knew about case managers. We had 8 employers that agreed to do this work together. And between those 8 employers over a 2-year period, over 1,000 case managers were conservatively going to be needed. And when we could look at that relative to the awards and the educational attainment that's required for this generic case manager job, it was really compelling. And the employers were then able to dig into, what's new, what's full-time. Oh, by the way, what even constitutes full-time? I bet many of you all are experiencing what we are, which is that in healthcare in particular, full-time is no more 40 hours a week. That isn't happening. So what is constituting full-time and part-time, and what are the business implications of scheduling shifts and so forth. So this is all the conversation that comes from your TPM data, your employer collaborative produces. And on the next slide, I'll just put up another couple of questions for your thought and consideration. You got a lot of other things you're going to want to know. The power about the TPM data is you start to have a really strong baseline that you can have confidence in talking to all your cross-sector partners, whether it's your workforce board friends, your education colleagues, community organizations that are touching the opportunity populations that may not even know about the job your employers are working on. A lot of decisions to be made when you're working with your employer collaborative on this part of the framework. So with that, it's not an exhaustive list. There's much more to be said here, but I think the other thing I would ask then on the next slide is really this last question to leave you thinking, what is one of the biggest lessons learned that you or your organization have had regarding the importance of data in this work? And I know Jamie's being my timekeeper out there, but we need some time at the end, don't we, Jamie, to go back to the large room?
But we'll just take a couple of minutes to do that so we can emphasize the discussion. That's what we want to make sure you guys get.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So then let's open it up, team. We've got a couple of more minutes we can allocate to having a few of you shout out. What's your biggest lesson learned regarding data?
Deb, I will, let me talk about an interesting situation that I've got, and it involves data. You know, the state of Michigan put out a sector strategies grant, which we were lucky to receive, and it's to start 5 different collaboratives. I'm heading up a construction trades collaborative. In that, I met with a flooring contractor who is having a very hard time hiring flooring installers, and he connected me to it's the Floor Covering Education Foundation, a national organization, floor covering professionals. And in this, they gave me all kinds of data about all these flooring people. The installers are all retiring, and you got to replace them. Well, talking to the employer, this is kind of where data you have to look at holistically. The employer says, right now I have about 10% of the installers I use are employees, 90% are contractors. And 20 years ago, it was completely the opposite. It was 90% employees and 10% contractors. He wants to go back to that, to having 90% employees, because he has more control. The fact, if you look at the data, though, that's the average right now is most of them are subcontractors. So it doesn't show, if you look at data for floor covering installers, that's carpet, tile, laminate, and hardwood, it doesn't show a very big demand. But that's kind of an artificial situation. So you always have to talk to the employers in your region to interpret the data that you have.
It's a really important point, Jack. Thank you for sharing, because that is where the employer validation comes in.
Yeah.
But I think
and the experience and what they maybe want to work toward can be very different than what's going on today.
Yeah.
you know, Deb, that's Jack. I've seen that. All I do is construction, and you always want to check the data in construction, because it may or may not even reflect trades.
Right.
Yeah. Remember, the data is collected through electronic postings, and often like welding. Welding in our area has always been shown in decline, although every employer out there is trying to hire welders, but they don't post electronically. They put a yard sign out that says welders wanted, or, or they work through a network of they hire by word of mouth. And so that doesn't get represented in the data. So you always have to look at the bigger picture.
Yep. And that's where associations, when I talked about who are your most important relationships, right? Because the data is one thing, but the relationships almost sometimes matter more.
Yeah, this is Kim. I want to say thank you. This was a great presentation. I always enjoy learning more about what you're doing there in Minnesota. And since we have a few of our new Illinois graduates in this particular group, I think the questions that you propose gives food for thought for those who are just beginning to look at demand planning, questions that they need to consider, but also questions that they could present to their collaboratives, to make sure that they're gathering the right information. But one area of data that I'm starting to explore that It's something that many do not look at, but we're starting to work with the reentry population. And one of the things that I'm starting to look at as the Department of Corrections as a training provider, because they are partnered with a community college and so forth, do those training programs that they're providing, do they align with the talent needs? So that when that individual re-enters into the community, that it's a smooth transition, or were they trained while in the system in a job that's going to go nowhere? So we really need to look at that to make sure that those programs adjust and or change according to the skills gaps and the talent needs.
So important, Kim, and thank you for saying that, because it makes me want to lift up another really important point. As the host organization or TPM practitioners, yes, we look to the employers to lead the work, but they don't always know, right? They don't know what they don't know sometimes. So it is our role to challenge the current practice. And I think, Department of Corrections is a great example, because there are so many occupations that historically employers have just said, nope, can't look at formerly convicted, anyone with a felony, those sorts of things, when indeed they actually could. And so it becomes a way for employers to start challenging each other about some of their assumptions that start to open the talent pools more broadly. Thank you. Great. Well, team, I think, Jamie, we're doing okay on time, and we might have made it through all the content. So there we have it, y'all. I had a summary slide that I want to just speak to, because I think it just hopefully recaps what I've done the Nordic polar plunge on here today. And that really is that, number one, data-informed decisions are very powerful in a way that other decisions just can't be. Knowing your data sources matters. Strong relationships with data partners, if you don't have access directly in your own organization, also matters. And then very powerfully, specific employer data is going to be actionable, and it'll be measurable. You'll have a baseline. You can establish a dashboard. You can set some improvement goals, and the employers can actually do that financial calculation, which is often missing, to say that what they're going to be doing going forward with their co-design training partners is different and more business beneficial, and frankly beneficial to workers and students and the education partners. It's a win-win-win. And then, as I love Jason's consistent phrase that sticks with me from cohort 9, Jamie, it's employer-led but not employer alone. So I think that's just really the way to look at this work. And I hope this session has been helpful.
Thanks so much, Deb. Really appreciate you, and hope that everyone found as much value out of the presentation as I did. It always is really both helpful and I think humbling to hear and get to see the work that you all are doing in your communities. And one thing that we also hope these webinars promote is just the exchange of information amongst yourselves as members of the TPM National Learning Network. I've had multiple conversations with partners recently where they've shared like, oh, I called so-and-so just to hash out this topic. Like, this is a particular subject that they are excel in on a day-to-day basis, and this is something that I know nothing about. And I know that Deb has always been very gracious with her time, and look to those of you that this is an area in which you excel. Share with one another, share with those of you that have more knowledge, share with those that have less knowledge. That's what this network is all about. So we're very, very grateful just for the generosity of time and knowledge that has been shared today. So thank you so much.
A little bit of a smaller group, which is actually ideal. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I'd love to hear, for those of you who are in this room, really quickly, if you can just say name, organization, and how comfortable you are with LMI. Like in one sentence, do you use it every day? Do you use it once a week? Do you never use it? Just really helps me fine tune the exact content that I'll be giving today. So Jennifer, can you start, please?
Only if I can find my mute button.
Yeah.
So I'm Jen Stein with a company called Captivate. We are brand spanking new to all of this. I know about LMI because I'm a current Academy cohort member. So never, I know about it in theory, but I've never used it.
Awesome. Thank you. Jeremy?
Hi, Jeremy Rios here from the Greater Phoenix Chamber Foundation. I'm actually here with my colleague, Jill Bushbacher, who actually is, I think she may have had to tune out, but I'm also here with Melissa Leisure. And so I will say that my director, Jill Bushbacher, is much more comfortable with LMI. I'm actually pretty new to it, just to give you some background.
Awesome. Thank you. Leanne Turner?
I am currently in the cohort with Jen, so I'm very new to this. I work for an employer, Logan Aluminum, which is located in Kentucky. So this is all very new to me from an LMI standpoint.
Very cool. Thank you. Caleb?
Hey folks, my name is Caleb Broughton. I am an employer alliance manager for Central 6 Alabama Works, which we're a workforce development council in Birmingham, Alabama for the metro region. And this is all pretty new to me. I started into this field with this organization in November. I started TPM online training, just a couple months ago, and I've been able to get through strategy 2, which I think is utilizing this. And so I've seen a couple of Lightcast data, and I've pulled up a few BLS reports myself, but that's about the extent of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Caleb. Emmy Epperson?
Okay. I'm sorry, my buttons are not working for some reason. Hi, okay. I think it's okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Emmy Epperson. I am with the local workforce development board, similar to what Caleb does, but for the state of Florida. I am a graduate of TPM from last year, and I am very familiar with labor market information. We use it on the daily here for my job. I work with employers, and we pull data reports for them pretty regularly. Thanks.
Awesome. And Melissa Leisure?
Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Leisure. I'm with the Greater Phoenix Chamber Foundation along with Jeremy. And I would say I'm also a novice at using LMI.
All right, thank you. Well, and there's a couple of us here that I'm familiar with some of you, and I know your understanding of labor market information. So just for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and get started. But again, I do want this to be engaging. I want you all to ask questions throughout. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask a question or drop something in the chat. I'm happy to stop and further explain things if need be. And then from here on out as well, if you have further questions about this stuff, I'm happy to chat offline at any time. Shoot me an email or my cell. I'm going to drop my cell in the PowerPoint as well. I'm happy to talk whenever you'd like. So let me start to share my screen. And present. And if I can get some kind of feedback. Do you all see my screen? Labor market information, the PowerPoint slide?
No. Nope.
I'm sharing my screen. Okay.
There we
you all
go.
see it now? Awesome. Awesome. All right. So here it is, labor market information. See, and I kind of already, before I go into some of the context, my name is John Gonzalez. I'm the Workforce Investment Board here in Tulare County. Before I get started, we like to talk about who we are and why we do the work that we do. Here at the WIB, we believe that in two things, and everything that we do is done so in a way to address this issue, which is that we believe that there are too many people in our region who are either unemployed or in low-wage jobs that don't sustain their family. So that's one thing. On the other hand, there's also too many businesses that have high-quality jobs that go unfilled. So with this, as recent TPM graduates, you all probably realize that this is very much aligned with what TPM tries to accomplish. So when Lisa and I attended TPM last year, we went straight into it and we've not looked back. So really happy to be part of this work. And we believe that labor market information plays a really pivotal role in ensuring that we make the right connections. Already kind of asked this question, so I'm going to skip over this. And so I'm gonna, because there's so many people that are so new to this, there are just a couple of like foundational definitions that I really wanted to get across to you all. And it's okay if you don't get it right away, as long as you're able to make some of these connections. I think some of these basic definitions will be extremely helpful in helping you understand labor market information. So understand when you're looking at it, and eventually be able to pool this data to help drive some of the decisions that you're making with your sector partnerships. So labor market information is data, right? Quantitative and qualitative data and analysis that is related specifically to workforce and employment. So again, it can be both qualitative and quantitative, but it's always related to employment and the workforce. When you are looking at data, either analyzing it or interpreting it for others, typically you're going to be doing it through the lens of either an occupation, an industry, or both. And I like to be able to talk about this because oftentimes occupations and industries, some of us, we confuse those two terms and we use them interchangeably, but they are very, very different. And whether you're looking at occupational data or industry data or a combination of the two, that's really going to impact how you should or could be making decisions. So when you're looking at occupational data, it's important to understand that an occupation is a cluster of workers, as you can see on the screen, based on the work they perform. Other people might say that a synonym for an occupation is a job. So again, there are clusters of people who do similar work. They are clustered into an occupation. Now, there are several businesses, right, that might have they might have people who do the same type of work, but they might call that job something a little bit different. So because of that, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has what's called SOC codes, or Standard Occupation Classification Codes. Again, all this is a way to standardize the way that we talk about occupations or jobs. Let me give you an example. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the very, very broad level of SOC codes, one of the broad level SOC codes, the 2-digit SOC codes, is 29, or healthcare practitioners in health and technical occupations. From there, as you add numbers right here to that 29, you start to get more detailed occupations, more detailed clusters of occupations. For example, for healthcare practitioners and technical occupations, you can go one step further and look at the 4-digit SOC code and narrow it down to, within this broad cluster of healthcare practitioners and technical occupations, there is this much more unique health technologists and technicians. And then take it one step further and you can get down to the 6-digit SOC code, where you're looking specifically at data for LVNs, or licensed practitioner and licensed vocational nurses. Again, every time that you're looking at data, you're essentially going to be looking at either SOC codes or another kind of code that we'll go over in a second. All right. Any questions so far on SOC codes or occupations? No? All right. And again, we're going to get into some more fun stuff, I promise. I apologize, my lights always are turning off. But I just really wanted to kind of set some of this foundational stuff. So we talked about occupations, right? Another really important definition is industry. So while an occupation is a cluster of jobs or similar work being performed by individuals, an industry is a cluster of businesses by type of economic activity. For example, actually, we'll get into an example in a second, but just like we have a standard way of classifying industry or occupations via SOC codes, we have a standardized way of analyzing industry through what's called NAICS codes. North American Industry Classification System. So all the three big countries in North America, Canada, United States, Mexico, all decided when we are talking about industry, we are going to be doing so through the lens of NAICS, right? So again, just a standardized way to talk, really similar to the SOC codes. You start really, really broad with a small 2-digit level, and you eventually focus it by adding additional layers. So 31, for example, is a very, very broad manufacturing sector. So again, businesses who are engaged in the production of durable or non-durable goods will all fall in manufacturing. And you can go one step further into the 5-digit NAICS codes, and you're now looking at animal food manufacturing. Take it one step further, 6 digits, 31, 11, 19. You're looking at dog and cat food manufacturing. So again, you're looking at data. Are you going to be looking at that data through the lens of occupations or lens of industry, or both? Because there are ways to look at both. What questions do we have about these two definitions? Again, really important. And we're going to be going into examples of how to find data for either industry or occupations. What questions do you have? Nothing? Okay. So moving on. As I mentioned, there are ways to utilize different, to look at either occupational data or industry data. Here at the Workforce Investment Board of Tulare County, for over 10 years, we've been using formerly known as MZ, formerly known as Burning Glass, now known as Lightcast. We utilize Lightcast to, again, it pulls from public sources, but we utilize Lightcast to understand occupational trends and industry trends. And we can even at times look at occupations within specific industries. For example, let's take nurses, for example, RNs. There are RNs, nurses, right? That occupation that are employed in the healthcare sector, but there are also RNs employed outside of the healthcare sector, ag sector, for example. So it's a really, really neat way for us to be able to kind of customize what we're looking at. So I do have this here. It is a direct link to Lightcast, whether you have it or not. When you get the PowerPoint later, you can click on this and go into it. I'm going to use 2 other tools, but before I do so, before I show you how I use Lightcast, I want to show you the other 2 tools, because the other tools that we have are free. Lightcast does cost some money. So before we get back into it, again, I'm going to show you an example of how to pull occupational data. So just as a quick reminder, occupation, again, it is a cluster of similar work or synonymous with jobs, right? So this is an example. I heard there is going to be quite a few people here from Kentucky. So I have here, and then we click on this, and I'm hoping that once I do click on this, do you all see my new, I went to a different web page.
We're still seeing the PowerPoint.
Let me do this, share. So I clicked on that image of the Kentucky Center for Statistics, and it took me directly to here. Again, you all will have this. There are web pages like this for every state in the United States, and I'll link you to some other resources soon. So in this case, I want to look at, I'm pretending that I'm someone from Kentucky, and I want to understand occupational data. So a lot of different ways to do so. You can click on these are some data, some projections that were created, almost look like profiles beforehand, or you can look specifically at by clicking on any of these things. So I'm going to look here where it says occupational outlook, and it's going to take me to this page. This specifically is for the time frame of 2021 to 2031. So it makes in this case, Kentucky made projections for growth or change in occupations, right? So not looking at a specific industry, but all occupations within Kentucky over the next 10 years. So you can see down, there's a lot of information that is pertinent to occupations in general. You can see educational attainment, earnings, and openings. A lot of definitions in here. Again, this is just a really easy way to just take a look at occupational data and projections. One thing to note is that, and I'll talk about this in a little bit too, projections are based upon previous growth. So it doesn't always take into account pretty important things like changes in the economic landscape or legislative changes that might affect an industry or specific occupation. So while this is helpful, it's just a starting point to understand where the occupations you're looking at or the industry that you're looking at is actually going. Okay. What questions do you have about this so far? Any questions? Okay. See something in the chat. Or pandemic. Yeah. Yeah. Good job, Joe. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to go back to.
John, could I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
I'm just curious for everyone on the call, do you know where to find your state's labor market information? Like this website that John used as an example from Kentucky? Does everyone know where they might go for their particular state?
I don't.
You said you don't, Jeremy?
I was saying I don't.
What I will have at the end of this PowerPoint is there's a website that links you directly. There are points of contact for every state. But just so you all know, I've never familiarized myself with labor market information for other states. All the work that I've ever done has always happened through EDD of California. But it was super simple. Honestly, I typed in labor market information, state of Kentucky, and it took me directly to the first option was this. Same exact thing for Michigan. I did labor market information, state of Michigan, and it took me directly to the page that I'm going to be showing you. So pretty straightforward. Otherwise, I will provide you with a link that has a contact list for every state.
John, I have a question just for
Yeah,
some understanding. You said that the data is based on previous projections. How far back does that go to give those projections?
It depends. It depends on what you're looking at. So, for example, when I utilizing Lightcast, when I'm asking for projections in the next 5 years, I know that Lightcast is specifically looking at what has growth or change look like in the previous 5 years.
Okay.
And it assumes that again, a lot of assumptions are made that things will continue to happen as they have happened. But again, it's take it with a grain of salt. Good to start off with the information, but it's super important that you put this data in front of actual industry partners and understand what are actual changes that are going to be affecting this, so that affecting our industry or our occupations, so that we may make better data-informed decisions. Yeah, but again, depending on the platform that you're using, you can ask it for a very specific time frame. Okay, so again, now moving on to industry, right? Industry is different than occupations. Industry is looking at clusters of businesses that have similar activity. And again, these industries, a lot of these industries, they do employ a lot of the same occupations, except that they are doing a very specific economic activity. So it is important that you understand, am I looking for industry data, occupation data, or a little bit of both? Because when you're navigating these different web pages, you're going to have to make selections eventually. So again, same thing with Michigan. I just Googled state of Michigan labor market information, and the first option was this one here. So I'm going to click on that, and I need to do new share. So when I clicked on that, it takes me here to this page. And as you can see, I can click on occupations right here. But in this case, I want to click on industries. So we're going to look at employment statistics, again, labor market information by industry. So where the last page, it was showing me change or projections, wages by occupation or job, this is doing similar things, but for industries. So again, for Michigan in the month of December, you can see a lot of this labor market information or these statistics, this data, as it pertains to the specific industry. So manufacturing, trade, transportation, information, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these are, as I aforementioned, different NAICS codes, standardized way of looking at industry. And again, really cool data to look at. You can look at where we're at in the most current month, where we're at the month before that, the year before that, and the different changes month over month and year over year. And beyond this, there's a ton of different things that you can do to search for data. You can do it by business, by employment. At the end of the day, though, all of this is through the lens of industry, right? Okay. So I'm going to go back to my slide deck. All right, a lot of information that I just gave you, again, about both occupations and industry. What questions do you have now? No questions? Okay, I'm going to move on, and please let me know if you have additional questions. So I'm going to give you a little case study. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth because I know this is very new to a lot of you, but I really wanted to make sure that I was able to demonstrate how labor market information was used in the TPM process. Lisa here on the call with me, she helps with the coordination of what's called the Tulare Kings Healthcare Partnership. So again, I'm from Tulare County. We work really closely with another county directly west of us called Kings County. We share a labor market. There's a lot of commuters that go back and forth from our county to theirs. So over 10 years ago, we launched a healthcare partnership via utilizing the Next Gen Sector Partnership model. And we've existed for a long time. We've always had a lot of great initiatives. But after going through TPM Academy last year, we decided, you know what, let's address the workforce issues of this healthcare partnership utilizing the TPM process and methodology. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of really strong healthcare partners from both county at the table. This here, it is a shortcut to our website, so feel free to look at it at any time if you'd like. And this actually picture is an actual picture of the meeting that we had when I printed out some labor market information and I put it in front of our healthcare partners. So this is actually what I did. I, utilizing Lightcast, asked for data about occupations within the healthcare sector, right? So I'm not asking for healthcare jobs. I'm not asking for specifically just the healthcare industry, but jobs within the healthcare sector. So when I pulled that for our two counties, this is what I got. So number one job, again, according to people employed and growth, this is what we have. So I put this information in front of our healthcare partners with the thought of, remember, these are all projections that are being made based on historic growth or change over the last couple of years, but only you know what's actually going to be changing. So we looked at some things, including how many people are employed in healthcare, what the change was over the last 5 years and over the course of the next 5 years. Again, this was last year that we did this, the percent change, and then the percent of jobs in healthcare. And while this was a great place to start, you'll see in a second, we didn't end up addressing all of these occupations because we walked our healthcare partners through a couple of questions to help them understand not only what is in demand, but what is most critical to us. And these are some of the questions or some of the dynamics that the labor market information did not take into account, and that actually ended up affecting the critical jobs that we selected. So one thing, there was tremendous growth projected in healthcare over the next 5 years. But one thing that the Lightcast did not take into consideration is the loss of COVID funding for a lot of healthcare partners. Healthcare partners became very reliant on additional funding from the state due to COVID. In addition to that, the expansion of Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal is is Medicare for California specifically. This year, so January 1st of 2024, there's going to be an expansion of Medi-Cal coverage to all individuals, all adults, regardless of immigration status. So what does this mean? This means that a lot of people who previously were unable to qualify for Medi-Cal will now be. Anyone from ages 24 to 49. This is huge for our local healthcare partners. And in addition, Senate Bill 525, which here in California is a bill that's going to increase the minimum wage for healthcare specifically to $25 an hour within the next couple of years. So these three things are massive, right? They're going to have huge implications on the industry, not taken into account in the data. But once we took this information into account, we came up, we utilized a couple questions that I'll demonstrate above, and we came up with 9 critical jobs. I still think 9 is a little bit, it's a lot, but 9 critical jobs that we really wanted to focus on, and that we're taking through the TPM process. So we asked first, yes, let's look back at the data that we were looking at. All of these jobs are all important to us. They all are in demand, but let's look at through the lens of the changes in the landscape of industry. What is it that we want to impact? So that list was large. We want to impact the development of many jobs. Then the next question was, what can we impact? We only have certain schools or educational institutions that produce certain graduates. So we knew that we couldn't say we need more doctors because we don't have the players at the table to produce those practitioners. And then finally, what do we have capacity to impact? So we start really large, we focus it a little bit more, and then we said, we all have jobs outside of this. We all are CFOs or CEOs of different educational or healthcare organizations. What do we actually have the capacity to try to make an impact on? And after asking those 3 questions and looking at the data, we came up with these 9. Community health workers, medical assistants, LVNs, pharmacy techs, psychiatric techs, dental assistants, dental hygienists, paramedics, and radiology technologists. So that is we, via looking at starting off with labor market information, we put that information, we asked a couple questions, and we came down to those. And now we're in the process of sending surveys out to understand the demand, the actual demand of these jobs, these occupations here in our region. What questions do we have? No questions? Okay. So, Nikki, how much time do I have left?
I think you have about 2 minutes left.
Okay. Well, let me just go back to this. I'd love to be able just to show, for those of you who are unfamiliar, show what Lightcast looks like. Again, if you all have questions, I'd be happy to run some reports and send them over to you and kind of discuss them with you as well. I'm doing a new share. And this is just an example of how you can look at, sure, you can definitely use the free public sources that I went over earlier. We just like to use Lightcast because it's a little bit faster and more customizable to look at specific data. So if we're looking at occupations, for example, I can, for our region, we can do a search for, I have a priority sector, healthcare. I can look at health occupations within this 3-county region. It gives me a lot of really cool information pretty quickly, as you can see. So in this case, at the broad 2-digit level, you can see how many jobs are in the area, the turnover rate, average annual openings, and I can add and remove a ton of these. Are all the different data points that are available to us. But again, I know I don't have that much time, but I wanted to kind of briefly show you how you can pull this information pretty quickly when you have something like Chmura, JobsEQ, or Lightcast. But again, definitely doable still via free public sources. All right, I did a whole lot of talking, and it looks like we're coming back.
Thank you so much, Sean, for sharing that with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And then you have this, Nikki, so I'll be happy to take questions from anyone in the future.
Yeah, and absolutely. When we go back to the main room, if you have questions for John, you can pop them in the chat. That way we can collect them in the case we don't have time to answer them all right now, but we'll make sure everybody gets a copy of the slide deck as well. And John's contact information.
So cool. Well, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Nikki. Appreciate it.
Our colleagues start to come back from the other breakout room. Would love for folks, anybody who has something that they would like to share with the network, whether that's an announcement of some sort, some progress that has been made in terms of efforts within your community, or if you do have any questions, any kind of last minute questions for any of your colleagues or our team. Please, Jennifer.
So a little bit off the topic, and a little bit off the topic of TPM, but related to workforce development, with another hat that I have. I am managing a prize competition for the U.S. Department of Education called the Career Z Challenge. We are in phase 2, where they are implementing solutions for high school-based, work-based learning programs. And we are in need of some judges. So if you want to make some extra money and you have some time to give at the beginning of July, this is where I'm struggling because it overlaps with the July 4th holiday, given the school year and when it ends and starts. But we are hoping to have a mix. We have a lot of people representing schools and education, and we want to round that out and have each of our judging panels ideally have an industry representative. And what better group of people could I think of than this group of people who kind of understands how providers and industry work together. So I will post some information about that in the Slack channel for anybody who's interested. Just put my name as how you heard about it. I am the project manager, so I'll know who you are. But anyway, that's it. Just a shameless plug.
Thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate it. Anyone else by way of announcements or questions? All right, Vincent, you mind unmuting yourself and saying that good news out loud?
Sure. Yeah, it's crunch time for us right now. So there's 9 regions across the state in our healthcare ecosystem. We got 5 full-time TPM managers, really fantastic team we're building, and we're right now smack dab in the middle of strategies 2 through 4. And boy, oh boy, does the data say we have a lot of work to do. So I'll say from one perspective, it's job security. From another perspective, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit and opportunities to improve our healthcare workforce. So looking forward to next handful of months. Happy to share more later. Thank you.
That's awesome, Vincent. Congratulations and welcome to your new team members to the TPM family. That's great.
Jamie, I can talk a little bit about the challenge I was presented when I was in DC last.
Please.
Bob and Jason challenged me to get my chemical collaborative to provide or to produce an epic challenge. And yes, I've got the local intermediate school district tech center, their CTE programs have got 3 programs that are putting together 2 different teams that will be participating in an epic challenge for the chemical companies.
That is fantastic. I was just starting to try to type away furiously, but for those who are less familiar, EPIC is our newer initiative, employer provided innovation challenges, in which it's a very natural kind of progression for a TPM employer collaborative to be identifying a real workforce challenge, a real business problem that they're experiencing, and have a group of students, potentially even current workers, try to solve for that problem and have an opportunity to present their solution to the group of businesses. So kudos to you, Jack, for participating in that effort, and thanks so much to your employers as well. I think that will be a very valuable experience for the students that are able to tackle those challenges. So
it will be. The school district is very excited about it. We've got our kickoff coming Monday, and the closeout presentations will be May 3rd, I believe. And our second employer is on board, and we're working on getting that challenge put together right now.
Strategy 5 in action. I love it. Yeah, Jeremy, please.
Sorry, can everyone hear me?
We can.
Yeah, I apologize for the voice. I'm a little bit sick over here, but to kind of ride on Jack's coattails, the Greater Phoenix Chamber is also participating in the Epic Challenge. We'll be actually launching a program in the IT and cybersecurity space on March 18th, and we close down around May 3rd. Depending on the results that we can yield, we're hoping to expand, across all industry on how we can utilize Epic to promote a lot of project-based learning for our high school students.
It's fantastic. We're so happy to have you as part of this rollout of the initiative. So thank you for you and your employer's willingness to participate. That's great. And if other folks are interested in participating in Epic, our colleague Sarah Castro is the lead. Maybe one of my colleagues could pop her email address in the chat, because again, we do think that this is a very natural thing for employer collaboratives to be involved in. So I'm sure Sarah would love to hear from you all. We are currently piloting this, so it does not really cost anything but time to participate, but the hope is to be able to have host organizations play this role of kind of a clearinghouse of employer challenges that would greatly expand access to project-based learning and work-based learning, as Jeremy said. So we're really excited for where the initiative could go, and certainly hope to have more of our TPM members participate moving forward. I love that, Celeste. Thank you. That's awesome. And to work with a local HBCU, that's fantastic. Really great to hear. Any other announcements? Obviously want to be respectful of everybody's time, but anything else that folks would be interested in sharing? Okay, just by way of closing us out, Lexi, if you would pop up in the screen, just our final chats, which has our contact information. And Nikki, thanks so much for answering Caleb's question. But Caleb, if you want an introduction, by all means, please feel free to let us know. But we look forward to seeing you guys at our next quarterly engagement on May 29th. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get to see you before in person for that measurement, evaluation, and diversification workforce on May 23rd. So hope you can join us, and we'll talk to you soon. Please always feel free to be in touch. Can we be supportive of you and your communities? Thanks so much. Have a great day.